Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yedda Stancil, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. It is so good to be back. I am glad to be here and chatting with you today about more of this awesome Shut Up and Sit content. This is episode number 11. That sounds so incredible to me. And I had the most surreal, cool moment. And Robin's here behind the camera, so he could appreciate this. But I woke up this morning, and Robin, you're not going to believe this. My phone alert went off when I got up, and I looked at it. And from Apple, it was the alert that said episode 3 from Shut Up and Sit podcast is dropped because I'm subscribing to my own show, people. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I mean, just the power of manifestation. When you get an idea, people come together that are like-minded, that help you put stuff together. And there's been a team of people to help with this show for sure. But it was such a really just surreal but sweet moment to be sitting there and thinking, I thought this up. I dreamed what this would look like, how this would feel, how this would be. But the truth is, I never really knew what it was going to be like till the moment that it happened. And so there I was this morning just checking out my phone and being like, wow, like there's a show and like it's here. And I got an alert. The new episode was up. So we're dropping new episodes every week. And we're filming ahead, obviously, of course. But it was really cool to see the episode had dropped this morning. And I just went downstairs, got my coffee, had a little conversation with myself and with the universe and was like, holy shit, like this is happening. And what else is happening that's just really cool is I'm hearing so much from so many people that are listening to the episodes, whether it's a private message or on Facebook or social media, which I'm not a huge fan of. And I was just telling Robin about this earlier, that I did a big rant on Facebook yesterday, actually, about just the whole idea of personal development, what's missing, and how we get kind of tricked. Our ego gets tricked into buying all kinds of fads. And we'll talk about that eventually, maybe today, maybe in another show. But so this whole idea of personal development and, the ideas that I had that I wanted to bring to the world, that I saw something different. I saw something missing. And to be here and to actually have product that I'm sharing with the world and that you all are messaging me in multiple different ways and reaching out is just evidence that people are waking up. A woman messaged me today before the show started, and she just wanted to thank me. And she said, I'm in a real place of soul searching. I had some meetings over the weekend before filming this episode with several other people who are in the same place. And if you're listening today, you're definitely in a seeking space. But what I said in the post that I think is the most important part of my little rant was, it's kind of almost, I laughed at it this weekend, but I laughed with some compassion. The whole world is out there chasing everything outside of themselves, thinking that's what they're looking for. But the joke's on us. Everything that we need and that we want that are the answers are actually inside of us already. And that to me is what Shut Up and Sit is all about. And, it made me think about another comment. A gentleman had messaged me and told me how many years he had been a Buddhist practitioner. And he asked, was I also a Buddhist practitioner? Was I a regular, Buddhist meditator? And my response to him was this. My response was, actually, I just tell people I sit, and I sit in silence, and I sit in stillness. That's what my whole Shut Up and Sit message is about. I don't profess to claim to any certain type of dogma. And these teachings are meant to meet people where they are. And while all are welcome, the content that we're teaching in this episode, especially today on the Ladder of Inference, is meant to guide you through understanding a little bit more of your own inner landscape, which I think I did offend my mom because I dropped that on social media and I said it on the last episode. But your inner landscape's nobody's fucking business but your own. And we just let people walk in there all day long, offering us all kinds of shit to try to sell us things that we don't really need. And so in today's episode, we're going to shut up and sit down and we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're almost out of chapter 2. I'm sure some of you are probably wondering, God, how much is she going to talk about thoughts and thinking in the mind? A lot. We aren't educated on this. If we don't know what's going on in our mind and we don't know what's happening on our inner landscape, then we won't be able to do the work to really kind of shut up and sit down and figure out what's right for me. Where's my mind? Where's my body? Where's my soul coming together? And how does that work for me? It's wildly unique for all of us. And so this ladder of inference that we're leading into today is really exciting because for me, when I first learned this, I kind of had an aha moment and I thought, oh shit, that explains everything. And so as we carry into this, I also want to remind you, if you were listening on the last episode, that we were talking about how you get unstuck. Great episode with Chase Tuning, who is the CEO of Ever Forward. We did a great episode in Manhattan. But just to kind of carry off of, his personal story, he did the work to go within to get unstuck, to make his vision, to make his dreams come alive, to carry his dad's motto of live an ever forward life, to take it out to the world globally. So there was a moment, I'm sure, and I haven't talked to Chase yet today, but I'm sure there was a moment in his life when he woke up and saw his Ever Forward podcast pop up for all the world to see that a new episode had subscribed, that he had that same realization. And whether you're launching a podcast, whether you're launching kids off the bus and out the door to school today, whether you're launching a business idea, you're launching some courage to stand up and speak your truth, you're launching some creativity or an ideation to do something different or to see the world or offer the world something different, anything and everything that you're taking out in the world to manifest all starts inside of you first. So you've heard the success story already with Chase. And if you haven't, go back and listen to that one. It's a great one. I wanted to kind of just tell you though, there was a quote in the book that I put in here from Chase's testimonial that I thought was really interesting as it leads us into the next section, the Ladder of Inference. And this is what Chuck says. And it's in chapter 2 in the book, if you have it. He says, I've discovered that I have something so much bigger than myself inside of me. And by not sharing it with others, by not helping it manifest, by not working continuously for it, I'm doing so many people a disservice, including myself. That's my truth. And so we all do have something bigger than ourself, or just our ego self, or our fractured self, or our separate, small, wounded self. There's so much more inside of us. And we bring that into everything we do. And now that we are kind of deep into understanding thoughts, we went into cognitive distortions a few episodes back. I'm kind of building episode by episode for you to understand your uniqueness, your components of being human, how your brain works, what thoughts are, how they play out in the world, not only so you can go within and you can understand yourself better, but also so that you can offer compassion and kindness and acceptance to others because they're doing the same thing you're doing. And what do I mean when I say they're climbing a ladder of inference? So we've got this really cool visual. I'm a big workbook person. I love designing curriculum. I love designing workbooks. Probably because when I was a kid, one of the things I ask clients is, what was the one thing you loved to do when you were a kid? Like, what was your version of play? My version of play was teaching. I actually would teach and I would create ideas. And so my whole entrepreneurial world was always in me. If my friends came over and said, hey, Yedda, we want to play restaurant. All of a sudden I'm like, great, Robin, you be the maitre d', and Jasmine, you be the cook. And we would get out paper bags. And I mean, we didn't just play restaurant. My siblings would tell you, I gave people jobs. Like, we created a business model. And it would be the same for me when I would teach. I loved playing teacher, and I'd put all my little stuffed animals or my siblings in chairs. And oh my gosh, they would get into this. And Robin knows because he knows my sister. They would just go, oh, this is awful. And I would be teaching them and I'd be giving them information and creating worksheets. So I've been doing this my whole life. I love it. And so one of the things that's in the book is the Ladder of Inference. And if you guys are listening today, hopefully you have your own copy of your book yet. If not, you know to go to shutupandsit.com to get it. But if you're watching on video, there's this really cool ladder of inference. Literally, I want you to imagine, if you're just listening, a ladder in front of you. And the way that the ladder of inference works is there's this pool of available data, okay? And this available data there's millions upon millions upon millions of bits of data that you could process and that you could take a look at. And when you walk into any situation, your brain's job, now that you've learned that it's this amazing computer that sorts and shifts and searches and analyzes, your brain's job is to quickly scan the environment of that massive pool of data and say, oh, out of all this data, what do I quickly need to pay attention to and do I need to process? So the next rung on the ladder is it selects data. And so when it selects data, it selects about maybe 30 things that you're aware of consciously, 30, okay, out of the millions and millions of bits. Well, what processes the unleft data is your unconscious mind. And then Once it selects those few bits of data, it climbs up to the next rung and it makes assumptions. And then out of those assumptions, it draws conclusions, which is the next rung. Those conclusions actually, in the beginning of your life, build your belief system. And as you get older, the belief system that's in place actually filters that conclusion and then draws you to take action. All right, you're like, oh man, where are you going with this, Yedda? So remember, you're climbing a ladder. We walk into a room, millions and millions of bits of data. Thank God our brains are not consciously processing all of it. It would implode. It would explode, okay? So my brain walks into a room and I see 30 things consciously around me. And if you walk into a room, you're seeing 30 things. Well, wouldn't it make sense if there's millions of bits of data that you might see 30 things differently than I see? And this is the game that expands a little bit past the I'm aware that we played last time. But what we're doing is in this walking into a room, and I would love for you to do this. If you're in a room right now and it's a possibility, or if you're walking outside or anywhere that you're at, just scan the environment if it's safe and just notice, what are 10 things that I see in this situation right here? What are the 10 things that I'm paying attention to? And right now I'm noticing that there's this motorcycle that just drove by outside of our studio. So if you heard that, you know what? We're real live in the city right now, so I'm noticing, hey, that's my data I'm selecting from right now. But you know what? Even Robin sitting behind the camera, if he were to pick 10 things that he could pay attention to right now, it would be totally 10 different things than I'm paying attention to. Why is that? Because his unique human story and the belief systems that he holds is unconsciously and consciously filtering the data. So just hang with me. I promise I'll get you to the mountaintop, and then I'll bring you back down. So from those data points, I then draw an assumption. And that assumption might be, okay, I'm going to walk into a room and I'll give you an example I share a lot with clients. If I'm a woman and I walk into a room that's really crowded and I hold a belief that I'm insecure and people won't want to talk to me and won't find me attractive, I will walk in and actually unconsciously see the data that supports that belief system. I'll draw an assumption as soon as I walk in the room and notice that there are crowds over there and people are here and this is happening. What happens is I'll immediately draw an assumption that nobody wants to talk to me. And when I draw that assumption, that leads me to make the conclusion. So I'm going to go stand over here away from all the people. And then as I'm standing there and no one's talking to me because it's the assumption I've made, because it's the data that I paid attention to, what happens is it reinforces my belief system. See, nobody wants to talk to me. I'm no good. I'm insecure. I'm unworthy. I'm not attractive, whatever the narrative is. And then that leads me to say, well, I'm going to take action and I'm going to leave because nobody here wants to be with me. And here's what's different. Another person could walk in the room and that woman could walk in and say, oh my gosh, this is a great party. This is so exciting. Look at all the fun people there are. And then takes that data, makes the assumption, I'd really love to go over there and see what they're up to. And then draws the conclusion, looks like that's a lot of fun, and then heads over and then actually starts taking action because her belief system is, I'm fun, I'm enjoyable, people want to be around me. And then the action she takes is to start conversation and meet people, and she stays and has a great time. And then do you see the parallels here? We walk into every situation, and that's what in mindfulness they say every situation is neutral. And that took me a little while to wrap my brain around, like, what does that mean? Everything's neutral. Everything is just a big old mountain of data. Experiences are being filtered, and then we're climbing that ladder of inference in our own psyche, in our own mind. That's a meaning-making system that all human beings used. I think I just gave a good old Southern twang on my meaning-making system. Somebody actually emailed me this morning and said that she appreciated my Southern accent. And I thought, I don't have a Southern accent. I don't know what she's talking about. But anyway, so our meaning-making of climbing this ladder. And why is this important? This is so important because if everyone's walking into a situation with their own unique 4 components of being human, and they're processing the data, which is, multitudes, millions of bits of data, from where you sit in the room. Right now, I'm sitting on this side of the camera right now, Robin's on that side of the camera. What he sees and what our perspectives are totally different. If you're watching the video, your perspective is different. If you're listening, your perspective is different. So this is the way it works for us as human beings. So don't you think there would be some value to understand how people are making meaning instead of running in and assuming everyone's climbing the same fucking ladder as you? Your ladder is not the same as mine. Now, can we collectively come together because we have similar belief systems? Absolutely. Then what happens is this is a whole other episode, we build an entire structure in our psyche around, well, if you believe what I believe and I believe what you believe, then we believe the same thing, so we're right and other people are wrong. And we start to separate people collectively on belief systems. We're living in a time right now in the world where I couldn't think of a better time to be learning this curriculum than understanding what people believe and then how they're showing up in the world. And I get calls all the time to do lectures on diversity and inclusion now because people are like, don't you talk about human behavior? I do. But when I talk about and lecture on diversity and inclusion, I don't give people the statistics. I don't talk about the minorities and the this and the that. What I do is I actually drop below that and I say, let's talk about belief systems. And this kind of goes back to my rant that I put on social media. We get what we believe. That's it. I mean, I could end the show right here. You're getting in your life right now what you believe. If you wake up and you believe you are worthy of love, belonging, success, abundance, community, friendship, expansion, joy, unlimited health, wealth, wisdom, and I could just list the list, then you will get that. If you wake up and you believe, I'm unworthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not safe, nobody wants what I have to offer, and you're coming from not negative thinking. I don't want you to think this is just something that you just push away. Remember, we're not sweeping it away with a positivity broom. But if it's a belief that you hold, we don't want you to ignore that. We want you to, with mindfulness, to shut up and sit down and just let that come up and be in your awareness. And I can tell you there was a point in my life where I thought, I'm not getting the things that I want. And I had to sit down. And as I sat there in silence, I started asking, well, how am I showing up? What am I paying attention to? And if I walk in a room, to use my story about the two women who walk in and hold different belief systems, if I walk in a room, what would somebody that holds the belief that they're lovable, worthy, successful, what would that belief system, what would they see? What data would they pick out? And then what would they do as a result of that? So for me, mindfulness and shutting up and sitting down was really an inquiry process to understand that. Because, in the world, we're like, well, you should just be successful. Don't you love when you hang out with people? You should just be, have thicker skin, or, people will tell you all the time what they think you should be. But the truth is you are what you believe. And when people try to sell us things, and this was kind of on my rant about the gimmicks and the, I called it unicorn juice and crystal balls and, fairy wands and all that stuff. Does some of that stuff work short term? Sure. Why? Because you believe it's going to work. Does it work long term? No. Why? Because it doesn't really rewire and drop farther enough down into your sponsoring core belief systems of love and worthiness and belonging in a manner that would get you to show up and climb that ladder of inference differently. So I'm kind of full of a lot of numbers here today because I think this is important. When you wake up in the morning, did you know that the most active brainwave that you're in right when you first wake up and right before you go to sleep is the Theta brainwave? And in the Theta brainwave, you start to you're in this twilight transient kind of programmable state, if you will, okay? And that Theta brainwave, we're going to learn more about this as we get further in the book, but I feel like it's a good thing to just start teeing up for you right now. That Theta brainwave is also produced when you shut up and sit down. So any type of mindfulness practice, whether it's, and guys, you could Google, did you know there's thousands of ways to meditate? There is, literally. You've got to find the one that works for you. I saw a celebrity making a post about, how they meditate. Everybody can find their own silence and stillness. But when you go into this place of silence and stillness and you start to really connect, what happens is you start to really realize what you believe and you start to get the ideas and you start to hold space. And so in those Theta brain waves, you can actually access deeper programming. So in the morning when you first wake up, those Theta brain waves are more active. So that's why they tell you to do meditation or silence or stillness first thing in the morning, or guess what? Right before you go to sleep, when the Theta brainwave is the most active. It's the part of your brain that literally lives in a twilight subconscious state. And actually, when you go to a hypnotherapist, they induce you into a Theta brainwave state so they can access what's going on in the unconscious mind to pull it up into conscious awareness. So with Shut Up and Sit, what we're teaching you is the practice of silence and stillness is to help you tap into what's going on in me, what's going on inside of me. 95% of your day is driven by your unconscious mind. 95%. So that means 5% of what you're doing today is you making a conscious decision to say, hey, I think I'd like to do something different. And so when we go into our unconscious mind, we're what's called autopilot. And so here we are, we wake up, we got the best intentions in the world, but our belief systems, if they're nagging in the background, which is, oh shit, it's another day. Got to get up and get some coffee and get the kids out the door. And, this is going on and this sucks. And the news says this is happening and the world is going to hell in a handbasket and all this is awful. And if that's a core belief you're carrying out into the world, the rest of your day is going to pick data that validates that. Your brain is going to literally see what it believes. So here's what's really cool. You can expand what I call that kind of lens of awareness. So what's the whole point of shutting up and sitting down? It's to expand your awareness. And the way I explain that is if you walk into the room and there's that pool of available data and you might only see 30 and they might be lined up with whatever belief you have in your core belief systems, if you begin to sit in silent, still awareness and start to listen to what's going on inside of you, what thoughts are being created, what happens is you can expand and widen that lens. So it's like pulling the curtains back. You see more. And so now I walk in the room and I might see the 10 things going on and the motorcycle going by. But you know what? Since that motorcycle's gone by, now other people have moved across the street. And since that happened, all these other things are happening. And so now I'm aware of pulling back the curtain a little bit, seeing what's going on, but being able to be grounded in the moment I'm in and not let those things dictate the assumptions that I'm going to make next. And so I hope that makes some sense. I'm trying to put this in a way that you guys get inspired to understand. We're not meditating in the sense, and in some rituals in the Hindu belief system, meditation is a practice to reach the divine. I personally believe that you can reach the divine while you go inside of yourself to also do a little self-inquiry to figure out, well, what the hell is going on inside of me? Maybe while you are or aren't searching for the divine. But there's a divinity and a dignity to shutting up and sitting down that is really personal to you. And it's so personal that when you walk out into the world, nobody climbs the ladder the way that you're climbing the ladder. So what does that mean for us as a society? So if I wake up and I go, hey, I'd like to be more loving. I'd like to be more compassionate. I'd like to be more kind. I'd like to understand more about what other people are believing. That's going to require you to cultivate that in yourself first. It's going to require you to go into your unconscious and start to program a belief system of curiosity, of open-mindedness, of I might be able to hold two truths. Maybe what I believe is okay and what someone else believes is okay. These are all belief systems. And if I sat down with you on a one-on-one session, that's the first thing I'd ask you is, what do you believe? Just tell me, what do you believe? And maybe right now, that would be a good exercise for you guys to practice, is just take a moment and you can jot it down if you have pen and paper. If you don't, just ask yourself, what are some core belief systems that I hold? And when you think about what those belief systems are, you're walking out into the world. Can you start to see how when you go out into the world, you're actually creating your reality through the belief systems that you hold? That's what the Ladder of Inference means. So if we're not getting a reality or an outcome that we like, we can change it. But we change it by looking at what we believe. We don't change it by going to a workshop. We don't change it by reading a book. We don't change it by hanging out with people just like us. We don't change it by learning more information. And there's another chapter further in the book where we'll talk about the myths of behavior change. And I'll let you in on a little secret. The number one way to change a behavior is called social norms. If you want to create something different in your life, go hang out and be around people who are already doing it. The anxiety of a social norm will get you to just change on a dime and climb that ladder differently, even if for the few minutes you're with somebody, until you go back into another environment. That's the way it works. We're herd animals. We're mammals. That's what human beings are. We love senses of community. We like to be with a group of others. So if you want the fastest way to biohack past all this, and you say, hey, Yedda, I'd like to hang out, or I'd like to be a more kind person, and then I start to ask you what you believe, and you tell me that you're surrounded by a lot of people, places, and things that aren't kind, then first thing I would probably ask you is it possible for you to get into an environment where you start to be around people who are kind? Because you know what? When they walk in a room and they climb this little ladder of inference, they're seeing the data of kindness, because like attracts like. They walk into a room, they're kind, they see the things in the room that are kind, they connect with kindness, they give off kindness. It's that simple. And so as we look at this climbing the ladder of inference and where mindfulness comes in, it's the pattern interruption of the shutting up and sitting down long enough to say, what data do I pick out in any given situation? So here's a little mindfulness practice that you can actually do with that, which kind of builds a little bit on the self-inquiry that we talked last time. We kind of talked, I think, 2 episodes ago about the I am aware game. And so it's the same thing. You could walk into a situation, or you could close your eyes and imagine walking into a situation, and you just start to pay attention to where does my I go first? What do I notice when I walk into a situation? Do I notice that things are messy? Do I notice that things are neat? Do I notice that things are disorganized and crowded and noisy? Or what do you focus on when you walk into a situation? It could be at home, it could be out in your community, it could be in your workplace. Where does your attention go? Because wherever your attention goes, your energy flows, and wherever your energy flows, your attention goes. And so this is a really great exercise because remember, mindfulness isn't always just sitting in the lotus position on a cushion, holding rocks and crystals and listening to really soothing music. For me, back to answering the guy that messaged me in the beginning of the show, asking if I was a Buddhist practitioner, and I said, no, I just sit in silence and stillness. So for me, I've evolved past a lot of the distractions still of music and rituals, and I've learned to just shut up and sit down wherever I am and just find the silence and then listen to the stillness. And it comes when you listen to that stillness, there's just a knowingness. The subconscious speaks to us a lot in images, metaphors, feelings. And so I just listen. And if I get lost in thought, I come back. If I get lost in thought, I come back. There's no right or wrong way. If we make this thing about perfection, that's why I told the guy I don't label myself as any type of practitioner. If we make this about perfection and labeling, then the ego gets into it and says, okay, now I got to be the best meditator there is. Or now I got to be the best whatever this is. I just want you to practice being aware of how do you climb that ladder of inference. Let the silence and stillness just give you some perspective. And so here's a way that this would work. And so you can take a minute now if you want. You can imagine a recent situation, and a recent situation where you maybe had some resistance or you didn't really get the outcome that you were looking for. In your mind, you might have wanted one thing, but something totally different happened. And I know that happens to me a lot. And I can imagine you might have a scenario you can pull from. So if you can, recall that. And then what we do with mindfulness, one of my favorite techniques that I'm getting ready to teach you is called the rewind, rewrite, and respond technique. So I use a lot of imagination with my clients in mindfulness and shutting up and sitting down. And so what I want you to do is recall that situation. If you're in a safe space and you can close your eyes, I want you to actually imagine seeing yourself looking down at your feet, walking down a street in your mind's eye. And as you look down at your feet and you see your feet walking, begin to notice that you find yourself walking into a movie theater. And as you walk into the cold movie theater that's a little bit cool and dark, which most movie theaters are, you just go right down into the theater and you're the only one there. You walk into this dark, silent, cool, still space, and you have a seat in the middle of the theater. And then all of a sudden, on the screen in front of you, the movie reel that's playing on the screen is this most recent situation. And so I want you to just imagine watching yourself in that situation, whoever was there, wherever you were, whatever was happening in this situation. I just want you to practice being aware. And so you're in the movie theater, but you have objectivity, you have space, you have perspective, and you're watching what's playing out on the screen, just like you would if you just bought a movie ticket to go see a new release that just came out. And just with curiosity and observation, just notice in your mind's eye, what do you see about the situation? Who was there? What were they wearing? What did they say? What were they doing? And then when the scene is over, I want you to get up in your mind's eye from that seat, and I want you to walk back up out of the theater, but this time you're going to notice a door to the right, and you're going to go upstairs. And this is where the movie reel room is. So the projector's there, and there's the little window that the projector plays through. And what I want you to do is I want you to walk over to that projector in your mind's eye, and I want you to push the stop button. And then I want you to push the rewind button. We're going to rewind that scene. And I want you to ask yourself, how would I have liked to have seen this scene play out? Take that reel off of the actual projector, put it down, and go find the reel that has the scene that you really would have loved to have created, and put that on, and then press the play button. So we're still in our mind's eye, and we're using our imagination to look out this little small window to see the scene as we would like to have seen it played, now being played out on the screen below. And I want you to take a moment to just watch and observe. The director in you has now deliberately created the scene as you would have liked to have seen it played out. And then when you're done, I want you to press the rewind button again. And this time when you hit the play button, I want you to walk out the door and go back down into the theater. Instead of sitting in the theater, though, you're going to actually walk up on stage and step into the screen itself. And you're actually going to play your role, your character in this new scene. And I want you in your mind's eye to see yourself going through the situation, living out that scenario as if it were actually happening right now in real time. And so just take a moment, be in that scene, and notice how it feels, what it looks like. What data are you paying attention to? Who's there? What's different about the situation this time? And as you begin to do that in that scene, you can take as much time as you want. For the sake of the show, if you find yourself getting to the end of that scene and you're ready, you can step back out of the screen. And then what you can do is you can start to walk out the theater. Again, looking down at your feet in your mind's eye, watching yourself walk out of the theater back onto the street. And if you've had your eyes closed during this experience, you can just gently open them. If your eyes are already open, I just want you to sit with for a second. That's a mindfulness exercise where you can use your unconscious to rewind, rewrite, and respond in a different way. Here's what's really interesting about the unconscious mind. Your body, your mind, your whole being, if you're just staying in your mind and saying how you wished a situation would be, but you've never been able to be in that situation, your whole being will not show up and see the data and climb the ladder as someone that would believe that situation. So that little micro dose of a mindfulness technique that I just taught you is something you can use. Some people might call it guided imagery, self-hypnosis, but there's a little combination of all of that. But that's all mindfulness, going within, sitting down and tapping into what is it that I'm thinking, feeling, behaving, and then how do I want to behave in the world to create the way I desire to feel, which then naturally produces the thoughts that I want. And so when we go into that mindfulness practice and we use creativity that way and imagination, what happens is in your being, you just felt what it was like to be in that situation. You now know what it feels like to be in the situation as you would like to see it created. And then, a lot of athletes use this. This isn't new techniques, you guys. When baseball players are in a hitter's slump, and my son played baseball for most of his life, if they get in a slump, sports psychologists would have them in their mind's eye, see the ball, be the ball, hit the ball. Then when they would get up to bat, they've done this 1,000 times in their unconscious. So then their conscious mind and unconscious can line up and say, cool, now we're going to hit the ball. And so I know I'm kind of giving you the Cliff Note version here, but this is another mindfulness technique and tool that you can use that will allow you to go in and figure out, what would I like to see differently? But if you're not able to get in that situation in your mind first, you're not able to create it in reality second. Okay. And that's what we're talking about in climbing this ladder of inference. So that's just a quick little biohack of how you would use this work to figure out, well, what do I think? Well, how am I climbing this ladder of inference? If you want to get a different outcome, you can use mindfulness to imagine what would it look like and feel like to walk in the room and be the person that is included and loved and worthy and belonging. And, further in the book, we talk about Brene Brown. She's a big researcher in personal development. A lot of her research is around shame. But she says this: the people that get love, worthiness, belonging, success, joy, guess what? They believed that they had it, that they were worthy of it. That's simply it. They believed they were worthy of love and belonging. And so it's that simple, but it is that difficult. I feel you. If you're sitting there going, oh, that's great, Yedda, but if you were in my life right now, looking at what I'm looking at and the data I'm pointing out, I hear you, I feel you. I just wonder if you could be curious enough to say, is there something else in my environment, in my situation, internally or externally, that I can focus on that actually is going to take me in the direction of climbing that ladder to say, I am worthy, I am lovable, I do belong. And if you're in a situation where that's not possible, I'm holding space for you, that reality is somewhere inside of you yet. Maybe you haven't been able to really connect with it. But if nobody else tells you today that you're loved, that you're worthy, that you belong, I'm here to tell you, you do. You belong, and there is worthiness and value in every single human being, no matter what you say. I believe that. I believe there's worthiness in every single human being. And so if we could learn this ladder of inference for ourselves first, then it would change how we would interact with other people. I don't know what it's like to be anything other than what I already am, but I hold a belief that I'm curious to know what is it like to have a different gender, or to live in a different cultural norm, to have a different color of skin. What are all the other things that I don't know what it's like? If I don't hold that belief system, then my first question is, I'd like to ask you, how do you climb that ladder of inference? When you walk in a room, and I had a client one time who said this, and I didn't live in this awareness. It was not my norm growing up as a Caucasian female here in Richmond, Virginia. And while we might have had poverty and addiction and abuse, I didn't have dark colored skin. And so I was working with a client, and then this client said, you don't know what it's like to be a Black male, that literally what my parents did with me when I was growing up was sit me down and give me the talk. And I'm thinking the talk must be the sex talk, right? Like you got the talk. No, the talk was, don't wear dark clothes. Make sure your license is always with you. The talk that when you go out in public, don't argue with a police officer. The talk of how to show up in the world. And when you see data and select data, how to climb up through that as a Black male. And it really took me to a deep place of just real inquiry of wondering, I don't know what that's like. I have a Caucasian male son. I raised him. He has never heard me say, don't wear dark clothes, make sure you have your license, because when he walks out into the world, the data he sees is different. And so in the time and place and world that we're living in right now, this climbing the ladder of inference isn't just so you can manifest $1 million. I know a lot of people who can manifest money and are broke as shit on the inside. This isn't just so you can go out there and get your dream car or the love of your life. I know people who do that and they're still unloved on the inside. And so these ideas that we're using personal development or cognitive therapy, to hold rocks and manifest things, that's not what I'm talking about. Yes, you can do that. I'm talking about the dropping deeper in that says, what do I believe? And if I believe something different from what someone else believes, the conversation starts with, can you tell me what it's like when you climb the ladder of inference? And just like my client, I didn't know when he walked in a room, his data that he was selecting as a Black male was totally and wildly and radically different than the data I was selecting as a white female. And ultimately, guys, that's what we're talking about when we talk about privilege. When people live in a place of privilege, they make an assumption that everybody has equal playing field and sees the same data. And the truth is our belief systems filter the data. The data that we pick, all the millions of pieces that still get processed, by the way, in your unconscious mind, but the conscious ones that we pick draw assumptions. Those assumptions create conclusions. Those conclusions, here's the tricky part, the conclusions then keep the self-fulfilling prophecy alive. And if you look at my drawing in the book, it's called a reflexive loop. Our beliefs actually then unconsciously select the data we see next time. And so there's this loop that constantly goes on. So if you want to show up differently in the world, shutting up and sitting down and getting really aware of what you're thinking, which remember, a belief is a thought. You just keep thinking to the point you don't even know you're thinking it anymore. And so we're living in a world where people think their belief systems are their reality. But I got news for you. There's so much more underneath of all of that. That's that integrity of humanity, our shared common humanity that we're all connected to. And we're just spun off in so many different ways. And in some of the Eastern philosophies, they talk about the spider web, and the little jewels in the spider web are all the people in the world. And it's an infinity of a spider web. Lots of cool analogies and metaphors here from mindfulness. But until we shut up and sit down and figure out, what is it that I believe, and how do I show up in the world, and what data do I see? Until you ask that question of yourself and then cultivate that as a habit, and then you learn how to ask other people the same thing, that's the most powerful question. If you could leave this episode today and you could take one thing out of knowing about the ladder of inference, out of knowing this cool kind of rewind, rewrite, respond technique that I'm talking about, but if you could use this one powerful question today at some point, ask somebody what they believe. Instead of running and charging into their inner landscape and being like, you need to do this, you need to do that, What if you just took a mindful breath, you paused and you backed up and you said, hey, before we get into a dialogue about this conversation about our relationship or our finances or our business project, I'm just curious, what do you believe about it? What data do you see? And when you have a conversation that starts there, that's where the compassion and the freedom and what we call equanimity and mindfulness come in, because it means you're able to sit in that neutral space in the middle of all the data, in the middle of all the belief systems and say, this is what I see, but you know what? What do you see? And then ask yourself, can you have a calm conversation and hear the other person and hear them mindfully before you jump in and start trying to tell them what they're supposed to see and hear? And so this piece of the work for me is, it's obviously something, it's a very somber conversation for me because I think it goes way, way deep. Diversity, inclusion, belonging. We're in a world that's so divided right now, public health, politically, racially, economically. What if we all just shut the fuck up and sit down and be like, dude, what do you believe? And when you hear the answer, what if you gave somebody permission to just know, oh, that's what you believe, so that's why you see what you see and why you do what you do. And so I'll leave you with a story as we wrap up here. I've always been somebody who loves to just see things differently, but the truth is I've been doing that my whole life. And you'll hear this further in the book. But, when I was a kid, my mom raised us Jehovah's Witness for a while. So I was always put out in the hall, as you've heard and seen in the book. And so I would sit out in the hall while all the kids were having parties and having fun and putting, cotton balls on Santa's beard and, dyeing Easter eggs and all that stuff. And so for me, I've always been sitting outside, and I briefly spoke about this in the first episode, and watching everyone and everything. And so I've been trained literally with a belief system to not go running into one belief system or dogma or one way of being. I literally, psychologically, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, have been programmed to sit out in the hall and watch everybody's belief system. And so why I feel called to this work, and while that was a wound for me for a long time as a kid, can you imagine every time we did the Pledge of Allegiance, the teacher would be like, Yedda, you can't participate. You don't belong. Go out in the hall. And so for me, that pattern, while some people, and it took me many years to unravel that pattern, while it seemed like it was a wound, it was actually my greatest wisdom. And so I feel not only called, but I feel like in some bizarre way I was trained to do this work my whole life, because I don't attach to other people's dogmas. I don't attach to belief systems. And so as I grew up and I started traveling internationally, I was always drawn to human behavior, obviously. And I started to travel internationally, and I love so many of the customs all over the world, but I can enter into them and come out of them without getting lost in them, because I hold a belief system that all belief systems matter. And so one of the things, and this is where my story's going, is being in the Middle East. The time period that I went to the Middle East, there was a lot on the news here about Muslims and the Muslim religion and how terrible it was, and the Muslim women having to be covered in the abayas, and how awful it was. And so I went to the Middle East, and I actually had a chance to spend time in a culture where I got to know the women and some of the leaders. And so one of the places I went in Saudi Arabia, I had a 6-month visa with the royal family, a personal visa to go there with the royal family to teach in an all-female university on entrepreneurship. And get this, female leadership development and empowerment in a country that we've been told doesn't offer that. And I was so excited, but also so like, how do you teach female empowerment and leadership development when you're in a space and in that culture? If men and women are in the same room, there's a screen that divides them, and the women are back here and the men are in front of it, so they don't even see each other. And a lot of people at the university and the conversations we were having was, this must be awful, and oh my gosh, and it's so terrible. But that's the belief system that culture held. And so when we started having conversations of how to teach leadership development, and I started getting curious, how would I teach female empowerment in a country that typically and historically has not offered female empowerment? And I thought I need to get to know the culture a little bit better. So actually I got to know the women really well. And I put the gown on, the whole thing. And I said, I want to be in your culture. But I asked him, I said, explain to me what it's like. From the West, we look at this and we think all of your trappings are bad. And you know what the majority of the women there said? That they loved wearing the abaya. They loved their culture. That actually in their religion, in the Quran, the word for woman translated into English actually translates to mystery. And that they've been raised to know and believe that they're a mystery. And so the more I got into this really interesting belief system, the more I realized you can't empower people from taking one belief system away and forcing another one on them. And so how I arrived at teaching female empowerment in front of members of the royal family in this, in this really interesting dynamic was to actually teach the women to embody and embrace the belief systems that were in their culture that they loved and that they really felt that they had value around. And that if they showed up as their full whole self and the values of who they were evident and ready and available for others, people would see them as empowered on the inside. And empowerment on the inside is something that radiates to the outside. And so we had a great conversation about it. But here's what I want to leave you guys with. In that culture and going into that belief system, of course, I was able to leave and come back to my own belief system. Some of the kindest people in my life have been Muslim people. To this day, I have Muslim friends over in the Middle East that I speak to regularly who are nicer to me than some of the people that walk down the street here. And why is that? Because in their culture, I spent time to get to know what they believe. And I never once told them what they believed was wrong. I never told them they needed to believe what I believe in order to have value. I connected with them and said, tell me what you see when you walk out in the world and this is how you're dressed and this is what you're doing. And through that common connection, and then they asked, what was it like to see, to be me? And it was actually kind of comical because the people here that know me know this. My hair is kind of my thing. My hairdresser's been out of town. So if you're watching me on video, I've had curly hair for a week and it's about to drive me crazy. But I love my hair. I love having my hair blow dried. It's kind of my thing, you guys. I don't get my nails done or wear any gaudy crap. But with all that, what I'm saying is, if you know me, my hair's my thing and I hate to drive. So when I went to the Middle East, I found it so freeing that somebody drove me around and I got to put a scarf around my head and nobody saw my hair. They didn't even know what I was wearing. I could have my pajamas on underneath my robe. And so it's just such an interesting paradox that that our world is seeing one belief system as the only one, and then the other cultures are seeing their belief system. And for me, I thought, well, what if I embraced their belief system? And it was actually quite liberating. I didn't have to worry about my hair. I didn't have to drive a car. Somebody chauffeured me around because women over there couldn't drive them. And now they can. And of course, but the women there wanted to show their hair and wanted to drive. So my point is, belief systems dictate everything. You get what you believe, and your belief systems climb this ladder of inference. So as we go further into the book, we do more of this work. What we're going to find is, if there are belief systems that are holding you back consciously and unconsciously from creating the life that you are dreaming of now that you've done your love-based vision, if you haven't, go back a few episodes. When you're in that space and you shut up and sit down and you start to really get clear about what am I thinking, which is what's building your belief system, then you can start to move through what's coming up next in chapter 3, which is where we're going to actually be talking a little bit about one of my favorite things. We're going to be talking about the emotional guidance scale. My mom's going to be back, which is going to be really cool. I'm just kind of looking ahead in my book. And by the way, guys, if you don't have the book, hey, you can take notes. You can just hang out with us each week. I highly recommend that you either get the 6x9 little teal book. The only difference between the 6x9 and then the 8.5x11 black workbook is the workbook's a lot more right brain, has a lot more images, a lot of space to write. It's an actual workbook. The small book is literally just text, and you can follow along with what I'm saying, but you'll have to have your own space to write and make all your notes. But we're going to be moving into emotions next, because I'm teaching you step by step, week by week, how your psyche works, how you manifest and create reality. And if what you're seeing and what you're getting is not what you want, how to use silence and stillness to go within and do the work on the inside. Because like I said on my little rant on social media, when you do the work to be the love of your own life, to meet your needs on the inner world, and to fall in love with who you are, you'll never need to buy another personal development product to fix anything ever again. Can you invest in things and they're sparkly and fun? Yeah, but you're not doing them to make something inside of you better because you think it's broken. I want you guys to do the work to drop all the way down to the core of your belief, to know nothing's broken, nothing's wrong. You matter simply because you exist. And if you walk into the world with a belief system that says, I matter simply because I'm here, you'll climb a ladder of inference that you'll work totally different within your own psyche and within all your family, friends, coworkers, and community. And you'll want other people to find that love that you found inside of you. So we're going to be moving into emotions on our next episode and talking about that. And yes, I've got a wonderful client coming on the next episode who is a female executive for a Fortune 100 company. She's going to be talking a lot. Her name is Carrie Southall. She's another client that's in the book. She's going to be talking about this whole idea of understanding the emotional guidance system, understanding the power of harnessing her emotions, and how backing up, shutting up, sitting down and finding thoughts first, then allowed her to decide where she was going to create and take the energy of thought into motion out into the world through her behaviors. And so I'm not living in Mary Poppins land. I'm just here to give you guys some real deal stuff. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's enlightening. I don't know. Sometimes you might get off the call and be like, I don't know what the hell she said today. But hey, if all you heard was you matter simply because you exist, and that you can sit down and climb that ladder of inference and then ask others how they're climbing it, then I know you got something out of this. And as always, you can head over to shutupandsit.com, to our website. We've got a cool little blurb about what Shut Up and Sit is. It takes a few seconds to read. You got to click a button to accept the invitation, which takes you to a little page that says find your current narrative. It matches you with a product. And hey, you know what? If you can't invest that much time into it and you need me to send you a little short email with a hook and a trick and a gimmick and just a pay now button, then hey, that's cool. But you know what? I'm just setting it up in a way that you can go read about it, you can learn, you can find your own product. I'm not trying to sell you shit. I'm trying to serve you in a way that helps you to bring your best and highest and most beautiful self out into the world. So go check out the website. You got to read a little bit. You might have to click one or two buttons, but hey, you know what? I believe it's worth it. And the question for you to ask yourself is, do you believe that you're worth it? So I'll see you on the next episode. Until then, have a wonderful day. Take care.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. May you know contentment. May you be